Now let's look at two more concepts, nested class and inner class, and we're going to need them later on. So let's look at the concepts here. A class which is created inside another class, and a class which is created inside another class with the keyword inner. So this is the difference between the two, but there are a little more differences that we need to look at. So let's look at the nested class first. A nested class is such a class which is created inside another class. In Kotlin, a nested class is by default static. So its data members and member functions can be accessed without creating an object of the class. So without having to create an object of this nested class, you can go ahead and use the functions and members. Then the nested class cannot access the data members of the outer class. So it's a one-way relationship. So only the outer class can access the members of the nested class, but not the other way around. So let's look at this. We have a class called outer class, and then inside of this class we create another class called nested class. Okay, and usually you should create classes which are separated, so each having their own file, but sometimes it just makes sense to have a nested class. For example, if you really just need its functionality within the outer class that we're using here. And nested class example that we see here is that we have this outer class, and there we have a variable called name, and it's set to Mr. X. And then we have this nested class, which has a description, and then it has an ID, which is of type int, and a function called foo, which just prints the name and the ID. And then we go to our main function, where we try to access the description. So in order to access the description, we go to our outer class, and then inside of that we go to the nested class. So we're accessing the property here, and then we create an object of the nested class and we access the function, so the member function of that nested class. So the output is code inside the nested class and ID is 101. So now let's look at the inner class concept. An inner class is a class which is created inside another class with the keyword inner. In other words, we can say that a nested class which is marked as inner is called an inner class. So it's still a nested class, but it has this additional keyword, right? But the difference now is an inner class cannot be declared inside interfaces or non-inner nested classes. And the advantage of inner classes is that they are able to access members of its outer class even though they are private. So this is the huge difference, right? So the inner class keeps a reference to an object of its outer class. So if we look at this example here, this is the syntax of an inner class. So we have the outer class, inside we have this nested class, but we add the inner keyword. So inner just before the class keyword. All right, and then if we look at this example that we had before, the only difference now is that we add the inner keyword here to our inner class, and that we now can access name and ID. We could, of course, beforehand access the ID anyways, but we couldn't access the name. So you can see here the name that we're using is from the outer class. So here where we have this private keyword even. So we say, okay, this is private, so it should only be available within this class. But with the inner classes, you actually have access to even private class members of the outer class. Okay, so that's the huge difference. In a nested class without this inner keyword, this wouldn't be possible. So sometimes it just makes sense, and sometimes you just need this functionality, and then you make it an inner class and you can use it. So going back to our function main, here we have our outer class, inner class description. So we can access the property as we did before, and we can also access the object foo. So we create an object of the inner class, which is inside of our outer class, and then we can go ahead and use its member functions. So the output here is code inside inner class, name is Mr. X and ID is 101. So we didn't have this name is Mr. X before. All right, so that's it for now. Let's get back to coding, where we are actually going to use this functionality, and then it will make a lot more sense because it's a little bit abstract to look at it that way. So let's get into coding.